Welcome to Talking Democracy. Today our guest is Kansas Secretary of State Chris Biggs. Mr. Biggs is currently seeking election in the upcoming November 2nd election. He's a native of Kansas. He graduated from Kansas State University with a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work and then went on to the University of Kansas School of Law. He has served Kansas as a public defender, prosecutor, as Kansas Securities Commissioner, and most recently as Secretary of State. Today we'll be discussing the role of the Kansas Secretary of State and Mr. Biggs' positions as a candidate for this office. Welcome. Good to have you here today.
Well, it's very good to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
So I guess the first and most obvious question is, why should voters select you in this upcoming election?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. First of all, my whole life has been about public service. I'm a native Kansan. I went to Kansas State University and went to the University of Kansas.
So you've got the two big ones covered, and we're glad to have you at Fort Hays State today.
And obviously, I think it's important that people want to know that somebody who's going to be serving them, that their heart's in public service. And I've been a public defender and a prosecutor, and that's my commitment has been to public service. And I think also my whole life has been about enforcing and applying the laws in a fair and even way. And I think it's particularly important that you have someone running the elections that doesn't have a partisan type of political agenda, because that office is so important to protect the credibility and integrity of the elections.
So what motivates you to run, and particularly why did you move from Securities Commissioner to Secretary of State?
Well, I felt it was a perfect fit, quite frankly, for what my training had been. As a public defender, I had the opportunity to deal with enforcing and upholding the Constitution. As a prosecutor, I had to exercise discretion in interpreting and enforcing laws. As Securities Commissioner, I got an exposure to some business background and also to managing a statewide agency and being involved in some record keeping. And it seemed like a perfect fit for the experience that I'd had in terms of the duties of the office, which really cross all of those different areas. So it just seemed like a perfect fit, and I wanted to have the opportunity to continue in public service.
Now, can you explain for our viewers, what is the role of the Secretary of State? I mean, people see Hillary Clinton going abroad as Secretary of State. You're not out negotiating treaties with Nebraska or Missouri. What does the Secretary of State do?
Well, the Secretary of State's office, it's a constitutional office that we have here. My primary duty is as the Chief Election Office to work with the county clerks in carrying out the elections in Kansas and facilitating those and making sure that we follow the state and federal laws. And that's the primary function, I think probably the most important function of the Secretary of State. But we have other important functions which are not nearly as glamorous but are critically important. We are basically the record keeper for the businesses that file in this state. I believe we have 140,000 businesses that are filed with us. We have corporations, we have limited liability companies. We also have the not-for-profits that file with us. If anyone has ever had the opportunity of dealing with a notary, and we're the agency that manages the ability for the notaries to practice and basically regulates that group of people. We have some very peculiar duties. My experience is if in the legislature they want to pass a law and they have some function that needs to be carried out and they don't know quite who to give it to, it doesn't fit this agency or that agency, they'll give it to the Secretary of State's office. So we have some other varied duties. Believe it or not, we register sports agents in the state. We also have a quasi-regulatory function, which is to audit cemetery trust funds.
Okay.
And in fact, we've found recently that there are some issues in the state with some of the cemetery trust funds. But interestingly, we were asked to, given the authority to audit those, but we didn't have regulatory power. So that's one of the things we've addressed in the legislature. We primarily serve the function as the clerk, the record keeper for the state of Kansas in a number of areas. And we also are obviously the agency that deals with running and managing the election process in the state.
Okay, well, this is a good time for a break, and we'll be back with Kansas Secretary of State Chris Biggs.